Hello, welcome everybody. Hi, welcome. My name is Jana Weiss. I'm the Student Life Coordinator for Global Online College. And today we're going to be talking about from curiosity to claim the information research process online. And we have a wonderful presenter with us from the libraries. Her name is Alexandra Almastica, and she is here to talk to you all about the online research process and AI. Welcome.
Well, hello. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad that you guys make it today. And we are going to be having an exchange of ideas around this process of, looking for information online. Hello. And specifically viewing and thinking a lot about the information search process, okay? I do have open several different services that I'm going to talk about. But as a librarian that has worked with a lot of different students, I want to share that sometimes the part where we don't place a lot of time thinking about what we're doing is before we start writing in the research process and maybe constructing our thesis or our general idea. Okay. So you're going to see that this presentation emphasizes a lot of this is how you need to think. This is what you need to consider before you even, type one word, you know, because if you get all your sources together and you know exactly, where is your mind at in terms of dealing with searching, once you get your own style of searching going on, because everybody has their own preferences, you should be good to go in terms of, okay, this is how I'm going to use this tool, or this is how I'm going to do that, right? If you want to take the presentation with you, you can scan this QR code and place it on your device. I'm also dropping this on the chat for you for future reference, okay? So that you can take some notes. So thank you. So I'm gonna take a couple of minutes here, what you scan with whichever device you have, and then we'll go from there, okay? Thank you. Alrighty. So what is this whole thing about from curiosity to claim the information research process online? So before I even start, I want to raise the point that is very important. We need to always consider policy because I do integrate artificial intelligence in the form of generative AI, like large language models in this presentation. You have to speak with your professors and ask them if they allow the use of artificial intelligence or if they do not. Okay, if they do, there's something that I want you to always remember: practice academic integrity, meaning that you need to cite AI. You should do a statement, really explaining how do you use AI in your projects. And don't forget that your voice matters. And when I'm talking about your voice, not only am I talking about, the way you enunciate and pronounce your words, but I'm also talking about the way you think about things and construct your sentences, okay? Because AI has a tendency to flatten language and take, let's say, the flavor out of it. So I don't want you to fall into that trap of just kind of like surrendering your creative power to, the computer, because you shouldn't do that. You should retain authorship in the tone, in your voice, your syntax, right? And everything that is related to your creative output. So please keep that in mind. So then when we're talking about the research process, the first thing that you need to consider is like, what is the nature of your project? What is it that your professors or you're wanting to do? Because this could be for class or it could be a personal project, right? So what is the purpose? Where are you writing a paper? Are you doing a deck for presentations, or is it an annotated bibliography, right? And then, who is this for? Whenever you're making a project, your project is going to be for two people. It's going to be for you and whoever you're delivering. And in that case, it might be your professor, right? So then whatever we are working on is going to have a certain parameter of kind of like boundaries in terms of, okay, this is the length, or this is how much, or this is what you can or cannot do. So please keep those things in mind. And one thing that is really, really important is when we talk about the success of your project is, what exactly do I need to do to, let's say, complete the project successfully? Sometimes professors are going to ask you for articles with certain, domains, articles that have specific amount of words or a certain length. So as you embark on looking for information, make sure you read your assignments and that you understand what is there. If you need help, you can always come to the library. You can go to the academic centers, academic success centers, and we'll help you really, decipher exactly how you do what you need to do and how is it that you could do it according to your learning style, right? So that's something to keep in mind. So if you're approaching the information search process online as a journey, you want to consider, I'm going to define some things that I'm going to do, like words, maybe the problem, and then you're going to go and give yourself space to discover. And at the end of that process, you're going to decide. So what happens sometimes is that a lot of students start like right down here. I already decided what I'm going to do, and I'm start writing before even considering some general ideas. Okay, so then that might not be the best. Okay, because if you already at the end and you don't give yourself enough space to kind of like percolate your thoughts and maybe consider different angles, you might be getting like too attached to your own way of thinking and not develop like the cognitive flexibility of evaluating different things and then determining what's best for this. And in that regard, you need to consider that remaining flexible in the treatment of your topics is a good asset for you to have. Because I've seen some students sometimes that they get really attached to their topic and they don't want to switch. And then what they do is, because of the position that they assume on a specific topic, they're seeking one source that gives them everything, or they don't see in other sources little details. Sometimes it can be hard to find a source that approaches your topic in the same way that you're thinking about it. So when you have a topic and you're searching for information, sometimes what you want to consider is, what pieces of information can I get from different sources to create the knowledge that I want to deliver? Okay? Instead of thinking, oh, I'm gonna get just one piece and we're done. No. Because you're not here just to kind of like copy paste and deliver something that somebody else can read on a book. What we want to know is like, how is it that you're thinking about it? Okay, so at this time, do I have any questions or comments? Or are we
I'm
good to
not
go?
seeing any. Oh, somebody's typing.
Uh-huh. Let's see.
No questions.
Thank you. No questions. Okay, so we keep going then. So remember, stay flexible. So in this journey, when we talk about defining, we're talking about thinking, about your own thoughts, right? And this is really interesting because sometimes I've learned that when you have a topic, you don't consider this is what I think about the topic without having read any other source. So I want you to take a moment when you're defining what you're doing, and even before looking for information, there must be some type of reason that you have that maybe you are inclined to work a little bit more on the topic, right? And that comes from your lived experience and your exposure to a lot of different things. So it's okay for you to say, well, this is my opinion on this topic, and then Now I'm going to go and look for some information, right? And you can use encyclopedias, course texts, and some encyclopedias we have them in our library, and I'm just going to show you what we call them as reference sources. And that's a good source, right? And one thing that I want you to also do is stay curious about your topic and look for it in a lot of different places, right? So that you can get ideas about how you're going to approach that. And one thing that I like doing when I'm doing research is that I create like you could do it in whichever way you want. Some people like to use their computer or paper. It's like you create a log, you write what you're going to look for, because from that way in which you approach your topic, you can start generating keywords that are going to help you look for information in different places. Okay, so that idea of finding and defining terms that are critical for your search, it's really important. So for example, in the context of this experience that we're having today, my topic is going to be social media. So when I'm looking for information, I'm going to look for information about that particular subject area. Okay, um so then usually when you're working on a project, depending on the nature of it, you may have a thesis or maybe an argument that you're going to work with, right? So when we are working on that type of product, sometimes what we're seeking for you is to really have something to claim. Like, I'm going to make a statement about social media, right? And I'm going to take a position of it. So if you're working on your paper, you should have something similar, right? As defined by your professor. And now do remember that depending on the nature of the class, this could be different. Because if you're in history, perhaps you're writing a paper that's related to um what's the name of this event that I have a student working on? The Gilded Era. So I have a student that's working with the Gilded Era and the United States. So that's her overall topic, right? And she's now defining the thesis by her beliefs about that. And now she's going to, find some sources. So keep that in mind, because in different classes, you could approach this idea of having a thesis as the position that you're going to take on a topic. And that position, it may be fluctuating depending on your exposure to resources. um when you are in the process of discovering sources, this is where you start thinking, where am I going to go to find sources? Am I going to go to the library? Am I going to use, Boolean operators? Am I going to use a file type in Google search to find something? What are the areas where I'm finding information? Like what keywords am I using? What are the kinds of hits that I'm getting from databases, from Google? Or maybe what are some areas that are lacking, right? And then you want to keep in mind this perspective of like sectors. Where am I seeking information? And this is something that I use a lot when I'm trying to ground my search, knowing where I am at. Okay. So sometimes you have to determine, well, if I need information, what type of entity is going to give me that? Am I looking for information from the government? Is it maybe from a professional association? Is it a lobbying group? Am I looking through an agency or a university? Maybe somebody that has an interest, or maybe I can be working with librarians or professors or your tutors. So this is a really interesting and sometimes different way of seeking and thinking about information, because instead of thinking, oh, I need a book or I need an article, you're also thinking about where who is the entity responsible for that I'm seeking. This comes to as a tool for you to use. Let's say, for example, that you are in the nursing field and you need to write about ethics. Perhaps you want to consider that you need to find the website of the American Nursing Association to find the code of ethics. Okay? Let's say, for example, that you are interested in being a welder that welds underwater. Okay? And you may want to know what type of certification you need to get to be a professional welder that does the work underwater. So then you will go look for an agency that gives that certification. Okay? It's okay. If you disconnect, we'll still be here. Come back. Thank you for letting us know. So is this making sense, guys? In terms of, oh, I can, also think about which agency or, entity is responsible. And one thing that I highlight in terms of communicating with your professors and tutors and your librarians is that you can also use us as a sounding board. If you need to come talk to somebody, if you need to meet online because you need guidance about how to think about your topic, you can do that too. I don't want you to feel that you are like alone, going through the process and you don't have support. You do have a lot of support at ACC, and we are always here in a lot of different ways and modalities to make sure that you get access to support that will help you in your assignments and your projects. Okay. So questions at this time? If you have no questions, tell me in the chat. Or if you have a question, let me know.
I'm not seeing any questions or any hands raised.
Okay, no questions for now. Let me see. Thank you. So remember this idea of where information lives, where does it come from, who generates it, is something that it's important for you. And in this case, I'm actually talking about concrete people or entities. I'm not talking about generative AI yet, okay? Now, of course, I'm a librarian. I'm always going to share with you, you need to consider and explore the library as a first step to finding information. Why would I say that? It's because we curate resources for you. And in this presentation, and if you click on it, you have active links to this. We have a lot of different resources. You can use the Eagle Library search to, for example, search for a topic. I'm going to search real quick for social media. And when you use this service, you land in a different page that gives you access to a plethora of resources that come from all sorts of different services that we have. So for example, you have an article for Credo Reference, you have something from Learning Express Library, and we have way too many hits. So what is important for you here is to learn the layout of this page. Like for example, we also have more items in the catalogs. We have videos. We have a lot of different things. So let's say you wanted to narrow down a little bit more. You could say, you know what? I want to see academic journals, magazines, electronic resources, and we have even more resources, electronic books. So this is a good way to start exploring. Now, I will say this topic right here is a little bit too broad. So you need to narrow down this a little bit more. So for example, if I wanted to work on the topic of social media, and I wanted to search specifically for college students, I could use this search right here. And that's going to bring my results down considerably within the library. I still have something from Credo Reference, and then I start seeing different results. And some are peer review. It's going to tell you if it's coming from an academic journal, and all of the information that, and let me see how many, 32,000, still a lot, but I can narrow down even more. And I would continue to do so. You can also sort this by relevance, saying I want something that's a little bit new, or I want something that's older, right? And the way I got here was by going to the library site and just starting a basic search with social media, okay? So I highlight the Eagle Library search feature from the library website as a good way to start. And there's a specific database that we have also. It's called Opposing Viewpoints. And when from home, you're going to place your W number and your password. I'm going to do it from work.
We do have a question in the chat when you have a moment.
Okay, thank you. Let me see. That is no, we do not have podcasts available from the library. Am I not? What were you seeking with podcasts? If you don't mind sharing. You're welcome. But I'll make a note. And then I have a question for you. If you were looking for podcasts, would you be looking for podcasts like for entertainment purposes or? Ah, okay. So she shared informative and educational. Okay, thank you so much. We don't have post. Yes, Jana just mentioned that. The library doesn't, but HCC does have podcasts. What is that? HCC News? Jana?
Yeah, I think so. Let me see if I can find it and post.
So we do have one that's called HCC Up to the Minute. I'm going to share this one on the chat.
They post everything on their YouTube channel. I just put that in there.
Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. So that's one thing that you can check to see our content. There we go. Thank you for your question. So I was also going to share Opposing Viewpoints as a source for information. Let me see. Okay, I got in here. So Opposing Viewpoints is a very interesting product that we have because it allows you to look at different issues and find opinions. So these are some of the issues are there. And if you scroll down, you can find what they're saying about the different topics. So in this case, I just did a quick search for the page because I want to see what they have about social media. So when I go to this topic, for each of these topics, you're going to have an overview that is really good when you're trying to establish, the boundaries of your topic. Okay. It's going to give you some ideas for you to consider, some history and concerns, and then below you're going to have the information for the citation. So that's really helpful. Now if you wanted to just search the database itself for the topic, you could type your topic to see what you find, and then your results are going to be a little bit different because you will still get the overview, but then you will get this area in which you will have access to academic journals, the viewpoints, and primary sources. The viewpoints are really, really helpful when you're trying to, for example, establish your position on a specific topic and you're doing general search. So this database is Opposing Viewpoints, and it is linked in the presentation that I share with you. If you don't know what to type or write about in a class, this is a good place to go and get some ideas about topics that you may want to pursue. When you are selecting your topics, I'm always going to recommend that you try to select something that appeals to you, either at the personal level, or maybe let's say you want to write a topic because you want to be a little bit more informed about something related to your field of practice in the future as a professional. That way you can start building your knowledge base in regards to what you're going to do. Okay, so consider that as we're going. Now, moving on to what else can I do in terms of online search? There is something that I always ask everybody, and it is if you have used Google Advanced Search. I find that a lot of students haven't used Google Advanced Search, and this is something that everybody should practice a little bit, because what Google Advanced Search allows you to do is to I'm gonna search for social media and the word impact. No, let me look for effect. No, I'm gonna look for impact. Sorry. Um, and then I'm going to narrow down to a specific domain. I'm gonna say edu. Okay. So when I do this, what's happening is you are telling the search engine to look for that specific phrase and that word in a specific website. If I'm changing my search, I can also say, well, you know what? I really would like to have that, let's say in a PDF document. So what I'm now saying is I want Google to retrieve PDF documents that contain social media and the word impact. And you can see immediately from the results that we're getting some things that are really interesting. Instead of just going straight into Google and typing and then letting the algorithm determine, which is still, it will still do for a Google Advanced Search. But in this case, we're just increasing the precision a little bit more. Okay. So that is really good. Specifically, let's say you identify a company. Like we have a student that is researching Exxon. So he wants to research only inside a specific domain for Exxon. He doesn't want to be all over the web, okay? So this is one of the tools that you can use. Tell me in the chat if you have used this Google Advanced Search feature before. Say yes or no. Aha, good for you. We got somebody that used it. Anybody else? Good. Now you have a new tool on your repertoire. So don't forget to try it. And then if you notice at the top of the page, when you do the search, you're going to see these terms. That's what I call the recipe. So if you know this, you can actually change, let's say, the domain or the type of document. And then now we're saying, I want you to look in government websites for PowerPoint presentations. And let's say you can also, once you do this type of search, you can go to images. I'm going to delete this because we're not going to find PowerPoints in images. But then now what you have are results of images that include those words from government websites. So some students ask me what other domains I can use. There's a lot. There are a lot of domains out there. If you ever want to know what domains are out there, one of the best places to look is in ICANN, right? And check their frequently asked questions too. But ICANN is the agency that manages all the domains across the globe. Okay, so I'm gonna drop this on the chat for y'all to explore later. So now let's talk a little bit about AI and doing search with AI. I want as you embark in your exploration of artificial intelligence as a source for other sources, I want you always to be double checking and triple checking your outputs, okay? Because the problem with AI at this moment is that it is capable of creating things that are not true. So if you ask for a source, and I've had students asking and delivering and giving me sources that are not real, AI may give you something that is not correct. So you have to triple check if you engage in experimenting with finding sources with AI, okay? If you ask me which tool should I use, I'm gonna invite you to explore. On the image on the right, you have um a view of the top image of the top, let's say, large language models that people are using. The number one is ChatGPT, okay? There's Grok, there's Gemini, there's Claude. DeepSeek I cannot use due to government regulations over that software, and some of those I've never used. I have accounts in some of them, some I don't. So there's a lot of experimentation when it comes to using AI for finding information. Now, I am a librarian, right? So because of the nature of the work that I do when finding sources, I don't rely on large language models to seek information because number one, sometimes uh, I, I follow what the professors want, right? So if our professors want two websites and a book and an article, we're gonna go look in the place where I know that we can find that information with accuracy and veracity. I wouldn't just go into the large language model and tell the large language model, oh, find this for me, right? So that's number one. Number two, because I have a lot of experience using this type of sources, it's easy for me to just think about finding information in a different way. Okay. In terms of, no, I'm going to go to this particular database because I know it has this information. I'm going to get it out of there. And in that regards, when you're looking for information, let's say, and you really want to be precise, you need to know where is your source coming from? With AI at the beginning, let's say a couple of months ago, sometimes the sources were kind of strange. Now I'm seeing something different. So today we're going to experiment a little bit with how is it that, you can maybe retrieve some sources from websites that for you to evaluate. And that concept of if I'm going to use AI, I have to evaluate has to be embedded in your practices. You cannot trust the content at this time. So let me switch back. So if you notice here, I have an example of a prompt that could help in retrieving sources using AI. Now, this prompt is pretty long, okay? And you feel free to take it and then adjust it as you think that could work. You can also interact with an AI large language model to change it. But what we're going to do with it is I'm going to use it in different platforms, and then we're going to evaluate those results and see how is it that this works. So let me close a couple of windows here. And I'm going to start with ChatGPT. Now, I'm in the free version of ChatGPT, and notice that there is a mode for study and learning, and there's also one for deep search that's coming. Now, there's a certain kind of limit, right, in what we could do, and there are more features. So I'm going to drop that prompt in here, and I'm going to say, I'm going to switch my topic to social media impact. And I think I have that a little bit further down too. And we're gonna drop it there. Now I'm gonna copy this again because I have other ones that are open. So I know Perplexity is offering, I think, a free year for students, so you may want to check out to experiment. And some of these, like for example, Claude is one that I have not used in the past. So this is my first time. And I'm trying the same thing everywhere to see what happens. Let's see. It's gathering something from the web. These are some sources from the other one. And the last one still searching. Here we go. So notice that, for example, they are all given different types of outputs in terms of what is happening. Now, if I am looking at these resources, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to evaluate if the links work. Is this true? So for example, I will go and open this and then assess the website that this is coming. So that's a source right here, but notice that it didn't give you complete access. You have an idea of an overview for a book. If I scroll down, let's look at the one from Pew Search. That's an excellent place to look for information. Teen social media and health. This will be a good source. This institution is known for their research across the United States, and usually you see them talking about their research on the media. Let's take a look at the research from the results from Perplexity. It gave us an article from the New York Times. Now I'm going to click on that. Page not found. I don't like that. So that is something that I have a library database that I could go check if that article it's available. That result is problematic for me. Okay. Um, and then let me try one more here. Let's close these. So from Claude, you have your output, and then you have the same article from the Pew Research Center, and then it needs it didn't give us anything for the other newspapers. Now, do I have questions about that? If you have a question, drop it on the chat. So you saw how I was able to get some results because I limited that to 3. But one of the things that I noticed is that 2 of the results came from the same site, right? The Pew Search. And that in itself is a good source. But there's a problem with that. If you're starting your search and you limit yourself to something so narrow, you will never know the scope of a topic. Okay. So if you notice, when we went into the library databases, we have a lot of results from a lot of different sources. This was really narrowed down. And in a way, I was almost kind of like leaving out things that may have helped me in my search. Okay. So you have to be careful if you employ AI because you're really limiting yourself. Aurora is sharing some thoughts. It's interesting. That is correct. Um, so I am not one to tell you, oh, just go use AI for finding sources. At this point, what I will say though is that some library databases are integrating AI into the workflow through their own proprietary database interface. Another thing that I want to mention is that please don't pay for information. Okay. So, for example, one of the links that we had led us to the New York Times, and then we didn't find it, right? The library has databases that can help you look for information in newspapers. And newspapers are a great source for information, specifically when you're studying current events or you want to go back and look at an event in a certain specific time frame. Okay, let's say you want to go back to the summer of 2020 or maybe something in the 1980s. We have databases that allow you to narrow down to a specific time, okay, in terms of the content. So I'm going to go back to what I'm sharing here. So we did a little bit of exploration in different large language models. Be careful with using it to find sources. For me, this is very limiting. I rather look in library databases, but I admit that that is my, let's say, my bias, okay? So when you have looked for sources, let's say you went to the library, you selected to use some databases, maybe you use Google Advanced Search, and maybe you even found something using AI. One of the most important things that you need to do in the process is you need to decide what you're going to do. You need to evaluate it. You need to find maybe some intersections in the themes. Like, is there a specific viewpoint that is coming across different sources of information? And then you can even consider, am I missing something? Is there something that I have not seen in this topic? And that part of missing something in a topic is something that you won't be able to assess until you've examined plenty of resources, okay? In this day and age, one of the most important things that you need to do when dealing with information is you need to evaluate the source. Some people use a method that's called SIF on the left side, right? In which you stop, you investigate your source, then you're trying to find coverage that's better. And then you also emphasize like tracing the original source of information and understanding where did they get their information. I also like to talk about like the ABCs of information evaluation, when you are actually seeking to know who's the author, where is their expertise coming from, how accurate are they, what position are they taking on a specific topic, and also what is the age, how current is this information, because sometimes you may need something that's a little bit older, but sometimes you need to do something that's new. And then one thing that is critical for everybody is to understand where are they getting their citations, their documents. So just as your professors ask you to cite your sources, you should question sources that you use as to the sources that they're bringing to you. That is, for example, the difference between a blog and somebody sharing their experience or their thoughts, right? Versus somebody sharing empirical research that comes from, following a method and pursuing, proving where the hypothesis is true or not, right? So when you are looking at information, try not to just accept it as this piece of information is it. You really want to dwell into, is this something that's valid? It doesn't make sense. Where are the sources? Where did they get what they're presenting to me? When it comes to library sources, our databases and our resources have already been vetted in a certain way. That doesn't mean that there are not publication errors or articles that are taken out of publications because of mistakes that authors have made. That happens sometimes. So an art, unfortunately, we've seen instances of plagiarism at high levels, right? And when that happens, you gotta take that piece of information out of circulation. So we always operate from the point of view in which we're going to go evaluate and understand the sources of our information. For you, that's important as you go through your development process, because as you evaluate information and you get information for yourself that you know is coming from accurate sources, you are building your knowledge base, right? So then that's where your expertise is going to start arising. The combination of reading about your field, in addition to having experience in your field too. Okay. So consider those ideas as you're working through. Let me go back to sharing here before I move on. Any questions? Thank you. Okay, so now let's say you've gathered, you've gone to the point of um you have all your sources. One thing that I didn't mention, and I'm going to do it with a little notebook. Look, when you get your sources, let's say you're evaluating something from a book, okay? Whether it be online or on site or an article, if you're using a book, I want you to notice the page number from when you got that information. If it's an online source, remember maybe the paragraph, okay? That's important. Don't write, don't like consume information from your sources and then start writing your paper. Take a moment, or creating your PowerPoint, right? Or whichever artifact. Take a moment to document where you're getting things from, because that at some point is something that you're going to have to share with your instructor. If you don't, what happens is you might get confused in the process, and then you don't know where you got your information from. So it's really important that you extract different things, make a little note of that, and then move on. And you can do that in Word. Some people even do it with their phones. They like a piece of information, they take a picture. Um, so that way they document what they're doing. Let's see, we have somebody typing. Now, as you go into the process of writing, some people will invite you to start, in a welcoming way to whatever it is that you are delivering, right? Sometimes it's a little bit of a statistic or an insight onto your topic, or you are starting with a question. Uh, I want you to think about using quotations from your sources, like if you were a chef, sprinkling, using a little bit, not having a buffet, which that means is like, please do not put quotation after quotation after quotation. You really want to deliver quotations in a way that amplifies your voice and allows you to elaborate on your topic while bringing your own critical thinking. Okay, this can take time, and sometimes we struggle with picking up, well, what am I going to use from this source? It's a lot. So if you ever need help deciding what to do, you can always go to, remember, the academic success centers, or consult with a librarian, and we'll point you to different ways in which you can consider how am I going to look at a source and pick information. But a lot of it has to do with how you read and you interpret that. So summarizing and paraphrasing is very powerful when it comes to that. And as you're writing, you remember that your paragraphs have jobs, right? Your sentences should follow a certain flow, and your professors usually indicate in which ways you can approach this. Now, if you're working on a presentation, it's a little bit different. Um, what we invite you to do, depending on what you're delivering, is not to make a presentation that has, let's say, a whole wall of text. Don't do that, because usually what happens is like some people will have a tendency to just look at the presentation and not look at the audience, right? So you should gain enough mastery of your content as you're presenting to be able to make a reference to what you're delivering, but at the same time face your audience. All right, that's really important to deliver it in a way that is engaging. And then one thing that sometimes I've seen some students do is that they ask their friends, "Hey, does this make sense?" And then they also consider, is what I am saying sustained by my literature? Do I have a backup for what I'm going to say in my presentation or in my paper? Meaning, did I get a source for that? Okay. So, of course, depending on how you're working, you're going to have to cite. We have different tools for you to do that. Some people ask me about Zotero, Mendeley, and EndNote. We don't have access for that type of tool here, but I want you to keep that idea in mind, because they are ways in which you can, for example, download citations and have software organize those for you, and you will have access to those probably in the future, depending on other institutions that you might attend. So APA style, MLA style, and Chicago style are still standards that we use when we are working with citations, okay? And last but not least, don't forget to always ask your professor for guidance in regards to how to use generative AI or large language models in the context of school.
Thank y'all for chatting with us in the chat and answering questions and asking questions. Thank you all for coming. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.